Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PBA at noon. I'm Paul Benwell, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Caesar. I'm very excited to have Microbix Biosystems here with us today. I've been following this story for a couple of years now, as it's developed into a life science company and leader in the manufacturing of viral and bacterial antigens and quality assessment products. Microbix is cash flow and EBITDA positive with revenues in excess of $13 million. They are currently trading around 33.5 cents on the TSX Big Board under the symbol MBX. Just last week, KRC Insights initiated coverage with a target price of $1.40. Here with us today is President and CEO Cameron Groom. Welcome, Cameron. Nice to see you and be with you today. Please start whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Paul and Sophie. It's great to be here. As you can tell, I'm not in the lab today. We are working in cohorts, so I'm actually at a cabin, but we do have quite a number of great people working in the lab as we speak, about 80 employees working in a little over 24,000 square feet in Mississauga. So pleasure to present, and thank you guys for the interest in the following. I know we don't have a lot of time, Paul and Sophie, so I'm going to share a screen for our corporate presentation, and I'm going to run through a rather time-sensitive version of it, and I'll just move to a full screen version of this. So just a moment. There we go. So Microbix is a company that's been involved in and specialized in the field of infectious diseases for a long time. And of course, with the coronavirus pandemic, that's become much more topical of late. But it's not a question of our company trying to pretzel ourselves to be relevant. This has been our specialty prior to coronavirus, and it will certainly be our specialty after the COVID-19 pandemic has wound down. In fact, COVID-19, at least in financial terms, has probably taken more from us than it's given so far this year, although it has raised awareness of our company and our penetration within the global diagnostics industry quite tremendously. What we do is we develop, make and sell a whole host of critical products to the, excuse me, this has just jumped around on me, a whole host of products for the global diagnostics industry. And we sell those products all over North America, Europe, Asia, principally. About 40% of our sales go directly into North America, about 40% into Europe, and about 20% into Asia through North American and European customers. We provide a number of critical ingredients in making infectious disease diagnostic tests, and more lately we've moved into what we call QAPs, QAPs, or quality assessment products, for helping to ensure test accuracy. And also we're moving to now become a principal provider of viral transport media. This is the reagents that stabilize patient samples so that they can be successfully tested by clinical laboratories. We also have a drug partnering asset that I'll touch upon in the short time we have. And sales have been averaging for us about $1 million a month in our last normalized year, fiscal 2019, primarily to multinational diagnostics companies. And we've typically been running close to break even, but we are primed for some very considerable sales growth, specifically moving from our historic sales on the order of $1 million a month to 3 times that rate in the very near term. And we'll talk about why we can make that statement, what we've been doing to drive margins and earnings, and why there's an excellent prospect of some real and substantial share price appreciation for Microbix. Management team, I'm CEO and president. We've got a great team working alongside me: Jim Curry, our chief financial officer, Ken Hughes, our chief operating officer, Phil Caselli in sales and business development, Mark Lucier, SVP scientific affairs, and Kevin Cassidy, VP biopharmaceuticals and special projects. Just as importantly, we have a whole tier of management that doesn't show on this slide that are just fantastic professionals and are doing what I believe is superlative work in the midst of these pandemic conditions. Board of directors is equally distinguished. We have Martin Marino, our independent chairman, comes from a long background with the life science industry. Mark Cochran just retired as executive director of Johns Hopkins. Joe Renner, chairman of Zydus Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest generics companies in the US by prescriptions filled. Von Embro Pantaloni, our audit committee chair, long background, and my predecessor as CEO at Microbix. Peter Bletcher, a distinguished MD and entrepreneur in Ontario, and of course myself. From a market cap point of view, we're about a 35 to 40 million market cap range. We have reasonable average daily trading volume, so there is liquidity, and we do not burn a large quantity of cash, which is certainly preferable in any environment, and perhaps less usual for a high growth life sciences company. I'll talk principally today about our three sales-driven business divisions. And the first is the foundational work of the company, and that is our work in producing antigens. And I'll go into what those are, but those are the critical biology at the heart of many different infectious disease tests. And we provide those critical ingredients to well north of 100 global companies, name brand firms, but you don't see it if it's a diagnostic test of a global multinational driven by a Microbix antigen. Our name never appears on the labels. So we've been relatively invisible in that regard. And it's only as we've moved into the other two categories that we've been increasing the visibility of our company by having branded proprietary finished products that we're marketing to end users directly. And the first of those new categories is our work in what are called controls in various flavors, and we call them a quality assessment products as a good catch-all term. And these are patient sample mimics that help to ensure the accuracy of testing. And incredibly critical, you've obviously all read about tremendous problems with false negative COVID tests and false positive COVID tests. We're right in the heart of that, making sure that any number of companies' tests are accurate. And most lately, we've been asked by the government of Ontario to move forward and use our expertise in creating complex cell culture media to produce the media required to stabilize patient samples so that they can be taken to the lab successfully and tested accurately. And this is a grave need for the province and others, and we're going to be moving into a considerable scale of that production in the very near future. And we'll talk about the scope of that opportunity, which certainly is still being absorbed, I think, by the capital markets specifically. Immunoassays, I won't spend a lot of time on, but you can recap these slides on our website. They are available. Anytime you're running an immunoassay, these are the diagnostic tests that look for antibodies in your blood to show whether you've been exposed to a pathogen, whether you have immunity to a pathogen, or perhaps whether you're currently infected, requires an antigen. And what we do is we provide the antigens for a whole host of this category of tests that can't be replaced by other technologies. And this requires us to culture, purify, and inactivate a whole catalog of human pathogens. And you can see these are all things we grow safely at industrial scale in our facilities, purify them and inactivate them and ship them out all over the world. And these products can cost hundreds of dollars a milligram. And a milligram is the equivalent of half a dozen grains of salt in the palm of your hand. So when we ship a gram of antigen, and that would be if that were fully concentrated, that would be a fifth of a teaspoon. That can cost $500,000 for a fifth of a teaspoon. And that's because that highly purified virus can go into literally tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of individual diagnostic tests. And we provide that critical biology to drive all those tests. And it's given us a tremendous amount of expertise on how to manipulate different organisms, how to grow bacteria, how to grow the mammalian cells that host viruses, how to grow the viruses, how to purify them. And that's been our historic bulk of sales, about 90% of our sales. And it's a great business. It gives us tremendous credibility and connectivity, but it's been relatively anonymous. And so we've moved beyond this area into quality assessment products. And this is using those same skills in biology to create patient sample mimetics. So these can be on the form of a little vial that might look like a patient sample after it has been sampled, or they can be on a dried onto a nasopharyngeal swab that you see on the television all the time. And what we're doing is applying all our skills to create things that look to a test just like a patient sample, but are consistent, stable, and non-infectious. And in creating those, we began supplying those to a category of the industry associations that do lab accreditation, very specific niche, and gained tremendous experience in making these quality assessment products such that they would show as a patient sample, not just on one instrument or one test, but on everyone's instruments and everyone's tests. And we were providing to that lab accreditation organization niche about $1 million a year worth of product. It was about 10% of our business. And more recently, we've moved to provide those same sorts of products to the original equipment test makers themselves. And this has been an accelerating segment for us in providing quality controls to support the installation and qualification of new instruments, the training of technicians, and we have some major international companies directly buying product from us for those purposes, and others that are recommending our products for those purposes. And then the third category is actually supporting the accuracy of tests of patient sample runs, effectively bookending a run of samples with a positive and a negative control at the start and a positive and negative control at the end. And then you can have greater confidence that all the tests in the middle that were conducted are in fact accurate. And there haven't been technician errors, instruments moving out of calibration, reagents spoiling, all these things that can create the false negatives and false positives. But those, because they're directly impacting patient test results, those are fully regulated medical devices, and we needed the ISO standards and the licenses to produce those, which we attained in 2018 and even in 2020 specifically. And the segments have much different economics and branding. The PT segment is a niche. We do very well in that niche, and it gives us tremendous exposure and experience in creating these products. But the far greater sales opportunities are in the sales to the original equipment manufacturers under our Proceed brand. In other words, Proceed, now that you have qualified your instrument, you can proceed to start testing. And then in our RED brand, Real Economic Diagnostic is what the acronym stands for controls directly in the laboratories. And both those are proving to be segments in the tens of millions. And our sales are rapidly accelerating in those categories. We are now producing more per month than we did all of last year. And this is because of new product offerings in this category. And we're going to see that growth continuing to accelerate as we move forward. So in the spring, for example, we applied our expertise even before the World Health Organization had declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and created a very elegant control for nucleic acid amplification, or the PCR tests for COVID-19. We announced external validation of that product in March. We We're green-lighted to be able to begin providing it in Canada in April through our medical devices establishment license. We registered in early May with FDA successfully for these products. And in June, early June, we received our CE mark. All the while, we were building an international distribution network to move into 20 countries, which had been our objective even before the pandemic emerged, but with a different product focus, obviously. So this has become a tremendous help for industry and is now shipping in the United States, Canada, across Europe, Scandinavia, United Kingdom. And we see laboratories that take on our products go, my God, these are fantastic. Where can I get more? And we're seeing initial shipments that occurred very late in our third quarter, June 15th to Europe and June 30th for a June 30th quarter end. We had our first stocking orders in that quarter. We then began to see the first trickle of reorders in Q4, and that is greatly accelerating penetration and scale now. We also developed a control for COVID antigen tests, a different category of tests that looks directly for virus in the blood. You've seen that work ongoing. And that product we announced on October 21st that we not only created and validated the product, but in fact, we shipped well north of 1,000 prototype units to major lab accreditation organizations who are now running tests on all sorts of instruments. And we're showing that indeed, per our expertise, these work on everybody's tests, not just one test or a few tests. We've also done the same work in the sexually transmitted infection category with high-risk strains of human papillomavirus for which no good controls existed. This was going to be our flagship prior to COVID and will be incredibly important economics for us post-COVID. And we've also done this for another previously nearly untestable sexually transmitted infection called MGen, which is very strongly implicated in infertility. And all this growing catalog of quality assessment products is rapidly driving forward. We have announced we're validating our supply chain to move to production of 50,000 controls on swabs starting in January, and that our sales now are in the tens of thousands of units per month, and that compares to just 10,000 units across all of the previous fiscal year. As time is short, I'm going to jump to viral transport media. And this is applying our expertise in yet another very pertinent area. And this is providing the vial of liquid into which the swab goes. And when this swab is sampled with somebody's throat or their nose or both, it is then snapped at this break point, you can see, and put in a vial, usually 8 to 10 centimeters tall, containing 2 to 3 milliliters of a liquid that stabilizes the virus so that it can be tested and will still remain with its nucleic acids intact when tested. And it's been a huge need of the province specifically and other jurisdictions in Canada and internationally. You can't do PCR testing unless you have this media. And Ontario's been cobbling together supplies from wherever, whenever, however, of all sorts of varied quality and utility. We offered up our expertise to Ontario. We received a $1.45 million grant to scale up to become the predominant supplier for the province of Ontario. And we've been asked to scale to a capacity of 60,000 units a day. We sent out our first prototype samples to the province last week. We will certainly receive results of their validations in the next short while. And we're moving forward to initially have a fully validated supply chain in the volume of 10,000 units a day starting in the new year and move out to 60,000 units through the course of the year. Precise price with the province has yet to be negotiated, but typical in-market price is $4 to $6 per vial per our investigations. So you can imagine that 10,000 units a day, for example, at $5 a vial, that's $250,000 a week, $1 million a month. Coupled with our antigen sales that have typically been in that range, plus our cap sales that are tracking into that range, plus even the low end of this VTM opportunity, suggests we will have an exit rate of revenues in fiscal 21 on the order of $3 million a month. I'll scroll through some of these slides very quickly because I know we're short on time and we want to allot certainly enough time for questions on this call. But we are very much real operating business. This is a glimpse into our bioreactor laboratory. This room provides revenues of several $million a year within our broader facility and one of our critical products where we upgraded production technology to arrive at more higher and more consistent margins for a critical antigen called rubella, or German measles, as it were. But gives you an idea of the capabilities and the reality of the company. We are very much driving it with operational discipline, and sales, margins, earnings, cash flow are an integral part of our vocabulary. We're not a never mind the burn rate, think about the future kind of company. We're very much operational. We are taking a whole number of actions to drive real business value and results. And in conclusion, I would leave you with that takeaway that we have very much a real business where we make stuff, we invent it, we validate it, we manufacture it at scale, we sell it to first-class customers all over the world. We have great opportunities in our antigens business and improving margins in our caps and VTM, and we also have a drug partnering asset called catalytic urokinase that, upon partnering, would be a multi-$100-million opportunity for our business, but is not a functional business operations revenue generating asset currently. But there is equity research available on the company. Chelsea Stellick at Industrial Alliance Securities provides coverage, as does Bruce Krugel at KRC Insights, has just issued a 42-page report on the company, and both will continue to follow us. I'd like to think we have responsible management, and as well, you've seen some of the other team members cited, and very much an investable company. So with that, I'll leave off for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Much appreciated. Let's go through a couple of the questions. One that came up a couple of times and more towards the beginning of the presentation, but just so you can clarify for our attendees. So the question was, is you're the test or a test of tests? So
a test of tests would be a better description. We don't make tests. To go into and validate a new test and do it better than, Abbott, Becton, Dickinson, Cepheid, Diasorin, Elitech, we can go right down the alphabet. You need hundreds of millions of dollars and international infrastructure to roll that out. What we're doing is we're providing the validation of tests. This is an independent third-party manufactured product that can ensure not only that the test's working, from a manufacturer point of view, but also that it's being operated correctly at whatever laboratory site is being done. For example, these are controls. I think it's fine to mention a particular customer, but our controls are being run by a point of care services company that provides a point of care instrument at Netflix production sites, for example. They say, we want to test the cast and crew on a regular basis, make sure everybody's safe. Every time they light up that instrument, they run a positive and a negative Microbix control. Similarly, another manufacturer of a couple now manufacturers of test instruments say, whenever one of my instruments gets shipped out, somebody's just bought one for their lab, it comes with a starter kit of Microbix caps products so the technician can be trained and the instrument can be shown that it's functioning properly before it starts testing patient samples. So these are the sorts of, and then of course in the clinical lab, the lab director may say, I want to run a control every time I change technician shift, or every time I change the box of kits, or once a day or once a week. That's in their purview to decide. but these sorts of third-party controls are supposed to be run as a part of a proper quality management system under ISO standards for labs.
So then, Cameron, who would you have as competition? Is it Canadian, or I'm guessing you're dealing, you're global. So who would be someone who would be providing kits like this as well?
All of our competition would be from outside of Canada. And these are companies that are involved in the standards business. There are companies like Zeptometrics out of Buffalo, a privately owned firm, Seracare, Microbiologics. These would be some of the companies that we would run into in the field. Sometimes that competition is friendly, sometimes it's not. But what we are doing is providing products that we know work across multiple companies' instruments. For example, our PCR COVID test controls, we've validated that they work across 50 different companies' tests. So, for example, we've run across, Ontario has told us they're using 18 different PCR tests across the province of Ontario. A major hospital chain in the US told us they alone are using 7 different COVID tests to try and keep up with capacity. You can't stock 7 different controls or 18 different controls that are instrument specific and have any kind of quality system. So it's critical to have this cross instrument compatibility or commutability, sometimes it's called, for the controls, and that's what we do extremely well.
Great. So here's a hard one to answer all the time, but what's your goal for income in 1 year? So I guess the better question would be projection.
We did 13.5 million in the year ended September 2019, which was sort of the last normal year, I guess you could call it. And we were certainly tracking higher than that in fiscal 2020. We're actually going to come in lower than that for fiscal 2020, because a lot of the conventional tests in that big catalog I showed you, people aren't going to the doctor for tests other than for COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases, of course. So we've actually seen a fall off in our antigen business, while we've seen an acceleration in our quality products business. So for the year ended September 2021, we're looking at we budget conservatively, and we're looking for flattish sales in our antigen business versus 2020. We're looking for certainly triple-digit growth in our controls, in our QAPs controls business, and we're looking, of course, at viral transport media at being up and running at that 10,000 unit a day, 5 days a week level, and then moving it forward to multiples of that throughout the year. So this is why, our budgetary numbers will be certainly up dramatically in 2021 fiscal, if I have anything to do with it, and our team does. And our exit rate promises to be very strong. And the broad target I would be looking at would be that each of the businesses each of the functional lines is providing on the order of that $1 million a month range.
Okay. What is the management ownership interest, and who are your major investors?
We have our management team collectively own about 15. Well, our founding chairman just retired, so I'll include him in that insider group on an honorary basis. But we have about 15% ownership across the founders and management team and board. I've personally bought about 1.4 million shares in the market during my tenure. As cash money payment to supplement other options and warrants that I've acquired. And you'll see, I just bought 50,000 the other week. I think you'll see some of the other management team as periodic buyers in the market. And anytime we've raised equity, you've seen very strong support from management and directors. The last raise we did was in January 2020, and we had 12 directors and managers participate in that offering for 25% of it, and we dialed ourselves back. We were willing to go higher than that.
That's phenomenal. Do you have, here's another question. are you accredited with like the FDA, Health Canada? Are there certain accreditations that you had to go through?
Absolutely. We have, of course, our ISO 9001, the more generic quality standard. We have specifically accreditation under ISO 13485, and that is the appropriate medical devices classification of ISO for what we're doing. And that applies to our QAPs products and will apply to our viral transport media. We have a medical devices establishment license from Health Canada. We have a pathogens and toxins license from Public Health Agency of Canada. We are registered with FDA. We are registered with Australia's TGA. And we are also providing CE mark products under the European registration. Our RED controls are certified under CE mark program in Europe. So definitely, yes.
You're well covered.
Yeah, we have to, these are health products and they are regulated as such.
I see Paul's joined us. Paul, do you have a couple of questions for Cameron as well?
Yeah, you got some money from the Ontario government to help with developing the VTM kit, are they?
Exactly right, yeah.
Has the federal government kicked in any money?
In fact, they have, and we're very thankful for that. There are two programs that we have received funding from to assist with the scaling of our business. The first was announced in 2019, and that was with the FedDev Ontario program of the federal government. And that was for $2.75 million 10-year interest-free loan we can draw on for up to 30% of eligible product expenditures, including salaries, CapEx, and other related business expenditures. So we have been drawing upon that as we move forward. And then in 2020, through the Ontario Together Fund of the provincial government, we received a grant. So that is not, unless we don't do the work, it's not repayable. And that was after considerable due diligence by the provincial government. I'm delighted to see governments doing due diligence. That's what we want to see as taxpayers. And that is to move forward with the VTM project and also help us with automating and scaling for the quality assessment products. We've done effectively manual fill of north of 100,000 of these vials per year. And well, we didn't have to do that many of these swabs in fiscal 2020 as we were just launching the swab-based control products as branded Proceed or Red products. We are now doing tens of thousands a month of these products, and there are companies that may want us to move to the scale of hundreds of thousands per month, and obviously that's not practical to do other than on an automated basis. So that's part of what that project is. If you'll also notice some of our products are swab-based products. This is a Copan flock swab. And Copan is the absolute predominant producer of these sorts of patient sampling devices globally. And we're very delighted to be actually co-branding with Copan for our flock swab-based products. FLOQ, Flock, is their brand for this very high-tech sampling device. And they've graciously permitted us to append their brand to our own for the marketing of these products based on their quality and the technological leap that they represent.
Now, another question. Is there an efficacy standard of your test of the tests, if you understand my question?
There absolutely is. And this is the data we get from our relationships with the lab accreditation organizations that run the proficiency testing of all the labs. So in North America, if you want to test for a certain disease, you will need to subscribe to a proficiency testing program. And that will, for example, send you a blinded box of respiratory samples 3 times or other products 3 times a year to test whether you're doing it right. and we gain tremendous data, and we show, well, our control works on 99.8% of the time, numbers like this, that the labs get it right, that ours work. And if there's any instrument that has funny chemistry or something that might interfere with our control functioning, we immediately find out about it, and can either flag that to end users or correct any issue.
Okay, that's I got one last question. Where's your focus going to be in the short term? And I'm assuming that it probably would be with the VTM business, providing these liquids for the testing.
Two areas. Scaling the VTM will definitely be a focus for us. That's an opportunity right in the here and now, and it's a screaming need, from public health. So we're absolutely focused on that. The other thing we'll be doing in the very two things we'll be doing in the very near term. In our respiratory catalog, we've registered as medical devices for lab, regular quality management runs. We've registered our COVID molecular test or PCR test controls, and we've registered our COVID antigen test controls. We've not yet completed the technical files for our flu A, influenza B, RSV, and other respiratory pathogen controls. Even though we've used those for many years in the proficiency testing business, we've not yet completed the technical files to register those for clinical lab use. And rounding out that respiratory pathogen catalog, I think, is very important, given what's going on. People need support for high volumes of testing, and the more this goes on, the more those tests are being multiplexed, so that you come in with respiratory symptoms, you're not just tested for COVID, you could die of the flu as well. So health authorities want to know what's going on with those, and if you can run 4 tests in one, why wouldn't you? And if you're running controls for COVID, it makes sense to have the same elegant and widely compatible controls for flu A, B, RSV. So we'll round out the catalog on those. We'll likely add to our high-risk HPV portfolio, and then we'll see where we want to go within the respiratory and STI categories for controls, and in fact, where we'll go next in creating a new strategic silo within testing support.
Perfect. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Cameron, thank you so much. I mean, this is a tremendously interesting story and very apropos going through what the world is going through. I mean, this is a global pandemic, and you can supply globally products that are needed to secure testing and things like that. Thanks to everyone who attended. Don't forget, tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and we'll be following you for the next 4 months, Cameron, if not longer.
Thank you very much, Paul and Sophie. There's a lot of information on our website, and our public disclosure history is quite detailed. So please feel free to dig in, and you can reach us through Paul and Sophie, and we'll be delighted to address any questions that you might have. So have a look. TSX listed, symbol is MBX, and we're also on the OTC QB MBX BF.
Thanks so much, Cameron. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, folks. Take care.